Hello, hello, and welcome everybody to the first December live stream. We are super excited to have you guys here. As you know, Nano flew by so unbelievably fast. And so I hope that for many of you, you were able to finish your manuscript. And if you're anything like me and you barely squeezed out 8,000 words, it's okay. I understand. But tonight we're going to be kicking off the new stream theme, as it were, for December, which is editing without mercy. So we talked about during Nano this, writing without shame, how to come up with our ideas, really kind of move forward, make progress, all that good stuff. Now we're going to be talking about the editing side of things. For those of you who have finished up, this is what you have to look forward to. And rather than fall into the repetitive editing hell that many authors whom I know and love and myself have also dealt with, we're going to dive into some tips and tricks on how to do that a little bit more effectively, which I'm very excited about. And then we're also going to be doing some editing sprints. Now, we may only have time for one, maybe two of these during the course of these streams. But the goal is to kind of take what we've applied or what we've learned and then apply it during the editing sprints. Now, if you're like, I don't have anything to edit, then you're just going to be writing and you'll be doing more writing sprints. And it's just going to make for a really long extended Nano. So it's going to be a good time. We also, if you have not noticed, have our chat open. And in the chat, we actually have a link. I don't know if you guys can see it. And if not, I will just kind of pop it up here real quick. This is where you can go and submit your writing for us to take a look at. So I highly encourage you to. It's limited to 150 words because, again, the live streams, we're trying to keep these to an hour. And in doing so with the editing sprints, we're trying to keep everything tight. So we'll usually only do about 1 or 2 editing samples per stream over the course of this month. But if you want to submit, go check out that form. We want to see your guys' stuff. All right, so per the usual, we're going to kick it off with a question and then dive into our first editing sample. And the first one was for me. So as a developmental editor, how do you ensure your feedback is effective without being too harsh? So that's a good question. One of the things that I am a big proponent of is not being overly critical, but rather being very purposeful in the type of critiques that I'm using. So as someone who was in fast food for like 7 or 8 years, and as a team trainer, I learned to develop my skill set of teaching people how to improve, how to do better with what they were good at. So it wasn't trying to get them to talk like me, do things my way, but more of, here's the parameters. How can I help you do it better, faster, more efficiently? And I applied that to my developmental editing. So when I was talking with people and giving those feedbacks and doing the longer edits, it is, hey, how can we improve this section here? And that got down to talking about, maybe you take this paragraph and just kind of rearrange it a little bit. You don't have to cut it. Or if I was going to suggest cutting something altogether, making sure that I gave a good reason that I hoped would fit within the author's view and goal for the book. So those were kind of some of the very basic things. Now, I had other people who were like, just take it, just shred it. I'll be fine. I won't cry. And it's like, that's not how it works, really. The goal of editing is not to actually shred your work to pieces. You just finished building it. Like, you don't need to go back through and come in like Miley Cyrus with a wrecking ball and destroy it. So don't. Rather, look at it and go, okay, I have to come at it with an analytical mindset, not necessarily just a fully creative mindset. How am I going to detach myself from this work for a period of time in order that I can look at it with as fresh of eyes as I possibly can? And that's where an editor comes in handy, because they're already detached. They don't have to do that. So when giving my feedback, I would always try to empathize with them to understand that, like, I understand that this is your baby. I understand that you probably just finished writing this. Let's go through and figure out what we're going to keep first. And that'll help us figure out what needs to go next. So that's my feedback. And then, I look forward to, if you guys have any questions about editing and stuff like that, feel free to drop it in the chat. But we're kind of limiting the curated questions for the most part, so that way we have more time for awesome things like editing samples. All right, so I have put this into a random order, and I'm now gonna pull this bad boy up here. Let's see what's, yeah, on the side's gonna work better. Okay, I think, yep, started it off on the wrong. There we go, wrong slide. Now we're on the right one. All right, so this submission was from Aaron Keeley, and the working title is Perfectly Fine, The Making of Crazy, and it's a creative memoir. Can't see the font because of these stupid glasses. I apologize. And let's go to to the actual script here. All right, so coaches, as you read through it, and if you have any critiques, feedback, just go ahead and start it off.
I think this is probably how most people feel right now, so I think it's very relatable. It will resonate with audiences.
So this is kind of a double-edged coin. It's something that I simultaneously like, but also think that maybe there could be a little bit of work done to it. Because of the topic manner, I like the snappy flow of it and the almost like stream of conscious writing. But if that is carried out through the entire memoir, I think that will be a little bit much. I don't know what the context is and like where exactly in the memoir this falls. But I would continue to use that, but I would use it purposefully and intently and not throughout the entire thing.
Yeah, I agree. This is an excerpt, so for sure, like if Aaron's purpose was to shock the audiences, it works. So as long as like the rest of the chapter, or at least the concluding paragraph, ends with something that flows, I think it could be a good chapter.
Yeah, I agree. I like Emily's observation there about the stream of consciousness aspect of it. I think that it works in chunks, and as that kind of shock and awe value. I think that in terms of your kind of traditional book format, the whole book, I would be careful about having that be the entirety of the book. One, because it's not what people are used to. And when people like, you want to try and find a happy balance between what people are used to and kind of doing a new thing. That's just kind of what I've tried to do when balancing out writing styles or giving advice to authors that are coming through publishing or that I've worked with outside of manuscripts. Is there's the new thing and then reader expectations, and you want to try and find that happy middle ground. And so if you take that combination of like stream of consciousness, but also your kind of standard chapter format, and like Zara said, you're kind of ending with that standard chapter format, I think that could work really well.
Yeah, going back to what you said, Emily, about purposeful, I think is the key here. Because with this style, it has to serve that higher purpose for the chapter, or else it's going to become confused within itself. But it definitely pops, and it definitely works. And the way it's written, the stream of consciousness style, it is effective. I'm reading it, and I'm thinking about ways, okay, maybe it could be normal, but then I think the pop would be taken away from it. And I'm looking at each sentence and saying, after there's Minnesota, I'm thinking, okay, maybe the sentence could just end there, and a new sentence could begin. But then the effectiveness of, and then wait a minute, completely goes away. So I totally understand why it's in this style, and I think it works. It just, how long can it be sustained, and making sure that this part of your piece is the best time to use that for the overall chapter.
Plus, I also
it's definitely, it's like a shock to the system. In a good way. It could serve in a good way, as long as it's not. I think if Erin can even make it like a thread throughout the book, she can start every chapter with sort of this like short shock to the system style of writing, and then continue like with the normal flow. Or, you know what I mean? Like make it
Yep.
her adopt the style, but in a very purposeful way.
Yeah. And Nicole, did you have something?
Yeah, one thing that I was just going to say is, because I'm a fan of this in my writing, is I love that sometimes it is good to have a standalone sentence, kind of to break up some of the heavy text. And I think, granted, this is a snapshot, but I really love the intentionality that they're putting in these two sentences that are standalone, because it really not only draws attention to them, but it serves as a really good reflecting point. But again, you don't want to overuse those as well. You want to use those very intentionally, but I really like, especially the last one where, she kind of has like fine, and then really like clear cut, like feelings inside, not expressed. Like I love just the like drama that she puts in that last sentence.
Yeah.
So Erin just gave us some more context in the comments, actually. Erin said that it's being used in an Indiegogo campaign hook, with this part of the piece.
I think specifically when it comes to doing marketing without the larger context, it could potentially hurt the campaign, just because people are not used to it, because it's a snapshot. You know what I mean? Like if you take things out of context and this is the only thing that people see, they take it for face value, if that makes sense, when it doesn't have to be, and it's not.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with a with campaign language. There is, and again, it's that tricky balance, right? Because we want to try and put our spin on things, but we also have to be cognizant of that reader expectation. Like, what are they looking for? How do I communicate it effectively? And I always feel like that changes like constantly. And so
It
we're always
does.
having to
No,
try
no,
to
no,
adapt and and try and make sure
no,
that
no, it totally
it's
does.
an
The
ad.
way I look at it when I work with media is I always look at how big movie studios build um, movie trailers, at least the ones that do it the correct way, right? They always pull the most popular snippets out of the movie to get people excited, and then you watch a movie and there's a nuance to it. But what initially drew you to buy a ticket was that specific snippet, a nugget, as Stephen calls it, that just catches your attention. That part that sort of caters to a larger audience, if that makes sense, right?
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Aaron, so much for submitting
So
and letting
much.
us kind of give our thoughts and our 2 cents on it. And I hope that it was helpful for you. We are now going to head into our first editing sprint, or again, if you are unfinished and a slacker like me when it comes to writing stuff, it's going to be just trying to get more of the book done. And actually, before we do that, we have a special guest author coach with us, Nicole Spindler. So, Nicole, would you take a moment and give us kind of a brief introduction to who you are, your book, because you've already published one. Give us that little bit of info before we dive into our editing sprint.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Nicole Spindler. I am actually an author coach on the educational side, supporting the Creator Institute. I actually published my book last year, officially will be tomorrow, 1 year ago. I published Beyond Life's Moments, an empowering outlook on transcending unexpected setbacks, which is a creative memoir. And then I'm currently in the process of publishing my second book titled The Reason Why, which is a realistic fictionalized memoir. And that is set to be published in May of 2022. And I am based out of Pittsburgh, and since obviously my time being an author already for a year, I've done about 40 speaking events across educational institutions, podcasts, newspapers, the whole gambit. So I just love writing, and I am kind of moving towards doing it full time. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Very exciting. Love it. All right. So with that, I'm going to share the screen because I did actually think in advance this time to get the timer up and running beforehand. Look at me go. So pro this Monday evening. All right, guys. So we're going to have 20 minutes to dive into editing our books. So on your mark, get set, go. All right. Ding, ding, ding goes the trolley. All right, guys. Well, technically speaking, it was a editing sprint. So I, for one, did not do any editing, but I pumped out about 200-ish words and completed chapter 8. So now I'm on to chapter 9, and I was able to finally name some of the chapters, because I didn't name my chapters in my fantasy novel, but in this one, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. So was able to finally name some of the chapters that I had just kind of had left as like question marks. So good times. How about for you guys? What did you guys end up with?
So I did kind of a mix of writing and editing, which you're not really supposed to do. But yeah, I read through kind of the 1,000-ish words that I have so far on my high fantasy, and then edited some of that and started to add a little bit more to it towards the end. So I don't know how many words that would be total, but progress nonetheless.
Nice.
I'm guilty. I did the same thing where I was like writing a little bit and editing as I go. So I ended up working on my author's note, kind of finalizing that a little bit. So I probably got through like half of it, which is probably about 500 some words. So just blend of writing and editing. So that's progress I made.
Nice. I was editing format for some screenplays. So
nice.
Not exactly writing editing. It was more technical.
I mean, I'll allow it. we won't throw you out of the live streams, Vince.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So Zara, who was on, she had to drop off. One of the publishing workshops is going on right now, but she had a great question that was popped up by one of the other authors, which is, how do you make sure you don't erase your voice when editing for the sake of appeasing your audiences? And I think this is a fantastic question, and one that comes up often, especially within writing groups. And I think one of the biggest things that I have seen personally is people are like, well, I don't read while I'm writing because I don't want it to influence my artistic flair. It's like, that's not how that works. I read to be inspired and to get ideas that I can then take and formulate in my own worlds. Like right now, I'm reading through Stephen R. Donaldson's The Mirror of Her Dreams. And super fascinating high fantasy novel, a little bit with some portal fantasy actually kind of mixed into it. And it already, just within the first few chapters, I was like, man, I could actually see how he describes things, how he uses language to just evoke the pictures of, where this character is at, all that kind of stuff. I'm not stealing his, and it's not affecting technically my writing, but I'm using it as inspiration. Now in editing, there are certain things like, well, I want to keep this particular phrase, even though it's like not grammatically correct. You can get away with that a little bit, but you have to remember that grammar does exist for a reason. And there is an industry standard for a reason. The vast majority of people who say that, they're the ones who have self-published for free on Amazon, and their cover designs look like Aunt Betsy made it in the backyard, hooked up to their Russian satellite link, and it's not good. Okay, so don't use that as the example by which you base your writing and editing experience off of. That is my 2 cents on that. But what do you guys think about that? How do you make sure that you don't erase your voice while editing?
I think what Aaron submitted earlier is a great example of this, because if Aaron were to go and edit it to the point that it no longer pops and no longer has that flair, then she'd be doing herself a disservice and her writing would be hurt by that. But there is a point and there's a difference between appeasing an audience and actually connecting with them through your writing. And to do that, there are, formats and things you follow for at least the majority of writing that make it much easier to actually connect with your audience and have your writing land. And certain things may make sense to you as the writer, but when you go back and edit them without mercy, which is the theme, there are times when you may think, oh, I'm just appeasing my audience, but you're actually making meaningful steps towards making a book that can appear before somebody and be interpreted by them the way you want it to. So I think there's a difference, and it's really hard to define it. It's hard to know what it is and where the line is.
I would say know what your voice is too. A lot of that at first, when you're starting out, you're maybe not necessarily doing intentionally, but the more you write, whether it's a book or short stories or poetry, and even in all of these different genres, the more you'll start to see kind of those consistencies and different things that you do. So like me, for example, I tend to use a lot of description. I lean a lot into color images, different things like that. So if that's something characteristic to me, and that's something that I've noticed or other people have pointed out to me, that's part of my voice, that's part of my style, and that's something that you can use and adapt to whatever it is you're writing. You may be writing in different genres with trying to fit those expectations of those genres, but you can still weave in those things characteristic to you to fit those specific needs of that genre.
And it's going to be like, at least for me, being second time author, is like, there is to Stephen and Emily's point, there is like this balance you have to achieve where, you have to kind of immerse yourself in your genre. You don't have to write it. You have to like live it and breathe it and like read about it. So, like, cause especially for me, like I'm writing a memoir, but also have romantic elements to it. I'm writing fiction. So like I'm incorporating like 3 or 4 various, elements that are in 3 different genres and trying to blend them together so they work. So I have to read works like that. But then I need to let some of my qualities, my writing strengths shine through as well. Like I use a lot of symbolism from where I'm from, Pittsburgh, into my story. I love a lot of descriptors. I love using dialogue sometimes just to, move the story along rather than just kind of like talking about the plot. So it's one of those things where it's going to be a constant, work in progress. But yeah, you definitely have to know what your voice is. You really have to, and be confident in it too, because, the audience, that's the whole point why an audience wants to follow you and why you want to build a community, because they resonate with your voice, they resonate with your story, and they want to listen to what you have to say. They shouldn't be the ones changing like your voice at all. So.
Yeah, a very, very good point. And I think one of the other aspects that just came to mind and is now just gone, absolutely gone, just poof. So if I remember it, I'll come back to it. Man, sucks getting old, guys. 31 going on 80. Anyway, so we are going to go to let's see. Editing sample time number 2. And this is actually Nicole. This is her excerpt she submitted to here. So I'm very, very excited about this, which I got to admit, when I saw realistic fiction, I was like, okay, like, I'm not sure like what that is entirely. Then it was like fictional memoir. I'm like, oh man, I don't even know how that looks now. Like, like I now call into question all the memoirs that I've ever seen published. Like, is this real? But yeah, so that was just kind of a quirky side note. Here is the editing sample. So let's go ahead and coaches, why don't we read through this, and then the first person who finishes and has kind of a thought on this, go ahead and jump in. So I think for me, I noticed a lot of the on-trend like romance language, like longingly, you know, just dazzlingly handsome, and you know, if anybody's dazzlingly handsome, he's going to have a dazzling smirk. So a lot of that, but I can't, like, as a personal preference, I don't feel like that's outside of that's on brand, that's on trend. So it's like none of that would be out of the ordinary is what I'm trying to say. Like, it wouldn't make sense necessarily in like a fantasy novel, but for this, to me, it feels on brand. I like the scene of them playing chess. One, just because I love chess, it's so much fun. But aside, but in addition to that, just the kind of the feeling of back and forth. I really like that kind of thing in books where there's that back and forth at play between characters, even if it's something doing, you know, like a board game. But the last phrase of the first paragraph, it was like watching a duet, a choreographed dance brilliantly executed on the ballroom floor. I love that as a descriptor for what they're doing here.
I would agree with Stephen. I love that, like, back and forth, and then the drawing on those little moments in between. The one thing that kind of shook me out of the narrative a little bit was that line that says that Emma was completely unaware that she was doing. I want to see that a little bit more than you just telling me that she's kind of unaware of this whole process. Whether it's leaning a little bit more into like the ballroom or the dancing like metaphor and like carrying that forward, or something else completely. But I think showing that rather than telling would be a little bit more powerful.
Yeah, I was going to agree to Emily's point there with that sentence, but overall, I really like the pacing of it and how the details just kind of play out rhythmically as I'm reading them. And in the second paragraph, you know, I'm already blushing. You know, Maverick's making me blush, so I'm feeling connected to the character and the chess game as well. I have a vested interest in Emma winning this chess game, and I don't even know her. So I think it's already working. I'm invested.
I'll just bring up Zara's like, so every girl's and Vincent's heart for Mavericks ever since Top Gun. Yeah, oh, and then here's Zara's. Your descriptors are great, Nicole. Just be careful about using too many adverbs when writing romance. It erases the show and enhances the tell unnecessarily.
Yeah, this is great, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Because it's good to see someone else read it other than myself and my development editor. So nice. Yeah, I was gonna say, it's also nice to know, hey, I can actually write a romance novel, even though it may not be working out for me. At least I can write one. So
well, I think with this, you know, because we had kind of hit on tropes, and we still have a couple of minutes left before the end of this. And there was one final question that I think would work really well here is, Emily, what is the most common mistake authors make when they self-edit?
Yeah. So the biggest mistake that I will see authors making, and I do this myself, so I am not innocent of this entire thing, but they'll do the right edits at the wrong time or in the wrong order. And we kind of talked about this a little bit with the self-editing earlier. But I want to lay out for you guys what that right order is and what you will specifically be doing within each of those different types of edits, just so you can leverage them to their full potential. But I want to preface by saying edits, if you're doing them yourself, really shouldn't start until that first draft is fully written. So that's why we kind of went through NaNoWriMo, and now we're moving into the editing phase with the idea that hopefully at this point you've finished kind of that first rough draft in whatever state that looks like. Really try your best, and again, I'm guilty of this too, to not self-edit as you're writing. It just throws off your writing game. And really that's because writing and editing require two very different parts of your brain. So just save yourself the trouble, get it written, and then move on to the actual editing. And kind of part of the reason I make that caveat of if you're doing editing yourself is that first edit that you're going to do is a developmental edit. And with that, if you hire a developmental editor, that process will take place during the actual drafting because you'll be going back and forth with that person. But if you're doing it yourself, and again, you don't want to be writing and editing at the same time, you want that first draft finished before you yourself move into the developmental edit. But with this developmental edit, it can include different things like word choice and sentence structure, but really what you're focused on at this point is kind of the overall story structure. So things like plot, setting, characters, really those like larger elements that drive a narrative. Then once you've kind of fleshed those out a little bit, you're going to move on to the next edit, which is a marketing and revisions edit. And so here you're really focused on kind of keeping your genre expectation in mind while you edit and making sure that you're aligned with them and breaking them in the appropriate places. You're also kind of fine-tuning those larger elements that you started to work on in your developmental edit. And then kind of as an additional piece of that, you're pulling out different scenes or quotes as you're going that you could use in marketing bits. After that, you're going to move on to your copy edit. And really for this, you're looking for consistency in different things like word choice, in spelling, in the content itself, in the style, and your voice that you're writing in. You're also making sure that you're looking for any plot holes that might have just kind of slipped through the cracks during like your developmental edit and your revision, marketing and revisions edit. And then after that, you're going to move on to proofreading, which at this point, you're still kind of looking for consistency, but mainly you're focused on just polishing the manuscript as a whole through those elements of grammar and punctuation. And really for proofreading, this is kind of like your last line of defense before you go and get layout or do the layout yourself and eventually publish. So with proofreading, you're wanting to make sure that all kind of your ducks are in a row and it's all polished. How editing is kind of structured is almost like this inverted pyramid. So you're starting with more of the broad spectrum elements of story. And then each edit, you're kind of narrowing it down till you finally get to those finer points.
Yeah, really, really well put. And I think just as an additional side note, one of the common mistakes that I see people do when they self-edit is they listen to Stephen King. Adverbs are the pathway to hell, which is not true. Adverbs have their context, and they also, and this is not as a counter to Zara's point. This is actually a broader issue that I typically see in groups where, like, if it ends with an ly, it is of the devil, and the devil made me write it, and it's just simply not the case. Especially within your first draft, please make sure that you just get the draft done. It doesn't matter what verbiage you're using in the first draft. You're going to go back and you're going to improve it. And at that point in time, you can then begin to refine it and decide whether, the adverb needs to be there or whether it needs to be taken and replaced with something that is more descriptive, that would more accurately reflect what it was that you were trying to convey. But because you're regurgitating and brain dumping all of the words in your head, you don't have time to sit down and look through a thesaurus to find. So that would just be kind of like the little add-on tip that I would throw in here as we close out for tonight. So quick thing, guys. Again, the link to submit to us is down below. So if you would like to have your work critiqued and have some comments and some feedback on it, again, it's a limit to 150 words just because of the timing. We're trying to do as many as we possibly can. So go down into the show notes. It is going to be there. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the little bell notification icon this side of the screen to make sure that you get updated. We have more stuff coming your way. We're actually going to have a author coach panel this Thursday with some self-editing tips and tricks from not only myself, but from other authors as well. And then next week, obviously, also Thursday, we're doing coffee chats and all sorts of great content coming your way, guys. So if you enjoyed this stuff, hit the like button, and then we will see you guys next Monday for another Editing Without Mercy stream. And look forward to seeing you all and giving you comments and feedback on your stuff. Have a wonderful Monday night, guys. Take care.